Late edition, I'm Wolf Blitzer in Washington. We're continuing our conversation with two key members of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, the chairman, Tom Lantos, Democrat of California, and Republican member Mike Pence of Indiana. Alan Greenspan has a new book that has just come out, Chairman Lantos, entitled The Age of Turbulence, Adventures in a New World, in which he makes a very, very sharp charge about the war in Iraq. I'll read it to you. I am saddened that it is politically inconvenient to acknowledge what everyone knows. The Iraq war is largely about oil. You agree with him?
To a very large extent, I agree with him. And I think it is very remarkable that it took Alan Greenspan all these many years and being out of office for stating the obvious. It is self-evident that this administration would not have taken the position it has had it not been for the oil issue.
A lot of oil reserves in Iraq, as you know, Congressman Pence. You agree with Alan Greenspan?
Well, I really don't, and I don't. I was never in meetings where the chairman of the Federal Reserve was present during the run-up to the war. I was in many meetings where we discussed the 16 different UN resolutions that have been flouted by the Iraqi regime, the unwillingness to open up to UN weapons inspectors, the record on human rights.
Because you know, a lot of people believe that the whole weapons of mass destruction was a charade. The real reason was oil.
Right. Well, but in point of fact, Saddam Hussein did have chemical weapons of mass destruction. He used them against the population. But
that was in the 80s. That was in the 80s.
It was
before the first Gulf War.
But you know, I don't think anyone really doubts today, Wolf, that if the government of Saddam Hussein was in place with everything that Iran is doing with a nuclear weapons program, that there would be a nuclear weapons arms race going on between those two countries.
Well, that raises a fair question to the chairman, Congressman Lantos. Would the U.S. be better off right now had it never gone into Iraq and Saddam Hussein were still ruling that country?
Well, Saddam Hussein ruling that country was a nightmare for the Iraqi people. But clearly, this was not the only way of removing Saddam Hussein. Had this war, even though it was based on a false premise, namely the existence of weapons of mass destruction, had it been conducted appropriately with sufficient forces, with a determination to put down the uprising early on, we would be in a very different situation. What we have is a double dilemma. The administration created a set of false facts on which to justify the war, and then conducted it with unbelievable incompetence.
Let me get back to the book from Alan Greenspan, Congressman Pence. He really blasts the Bush administration, the president specifically, for failing when the Republicans were in the majority in the House and Senate until the election of last year to veto any spending bill. Congress and the president, Greenspan writes, viewed budgetary restraint as inhibiting the legislation they wanted. Deficits don't matter, to my chagrin, became part of Republicans' rhetoric. And he goes on to say they deserve, the Republicans, to lose the majorities in the House and Senate because they were spending so wildly.
Well, I think you know that I would strongly agree with him on that, Wolf. I said after the 2006 elections that Republicans didn't lose their majority. We lost our way. And it was in the commitment and the practice of the principles of limited government, expanding education spending, creating new entitlements, the entire earmark culture. I welcome Chairman Greenspan's voice on this. Could have used it during some of those debates, but it's welcome going forward as the Republican Party is in the process of hewing back to those roots of fiscal discipline and reform.
And now that the Democrats, Congressman Lantos, the Democrats are the majority in the House and Senate, it's going to be a lot easier politically for the president to start vetoing some of your spending bills.
Well, if I may comment on Mike Spence's observation, he's a very good friend of mine. The problem is not that we are spending too much money on education. The problem has been the pathological opposition of this administration to taxing corporations and wealthy individuals whose tax burden has been diminished dramatically during this administration. Education spending is not driving us to bankruptcy. It's the unwillingness of this administration to have those who are capable of carrying the tax load to be exempt. That is the fundamental economic dilemma of this country.
The other